World-renowned percussionist Dame Evelyn Glennie has performed with the greatest orchestras, conductors and performers. She's a double Grammy Award winner and a Bafta nominee. Evelyn has a large collection of percussion instruments from all over the world. Interestingly, one of those is the Lambeg drum, an instrument unique to Ulster. When we at the Ulster-Scots Agency found out that a skin in Evelyn's drum was broken, we just had to come to the rescue. With a lot of help from the Centenary Drumming Club and a brand new set of skins made by Robert Hobson, Evelyn's drum was ready to make the journey home. I went to meet up with Evelyn at her Cambridgeshire studio and find out about her relationship with the Lambeg drum. Well, we've experienced some of the logistical challenges of moving a Lambeg drum over some distance. Just this week, we managed to move your Lambeg drum from Cambridgeshire back to Ulster. And the Ulster-Scots Agency was very keen to repair the skins and have the drum re-skinned. So what does it feel like to have the drum back?
Well, all credit to the transport company and for all of you for organising that, because it was a really quick turnaround. It feels great to have it back. You know, it was just a great big space downstairs where I normally keep it, and I really missed it, to be honest. But to have this back and in such good form, and the heads are so tight, and it's incredible, really, and I'm looking forward to just letting it settle, I think, and then giving it a go.
So what was your first experience of the Lambeg drum, and what made you want to own one?
As a percussion player and a collector of percussion instruments, I've always had my antennae, open to all sorts from around the world. However, I do remember I was performing at the Waterfront in Belfast. And it was a show, an improvised show that I was doing at the time called Shadow. And we had invited a group of wonderful Northern Irish musicians. And of course, they came with their lambegs. And I'm telling you, they blew us off the stage. I mean, it was so powerful, so physical. And of course, I was intrigued by the fact that they were wearing and carrying these massive drums, and it was the sheer power of it. And so that was my first experience close up to the instrument. And of course, it has this wonderful wooden shell, real animal skins, and the resonance is quite unique. You have a very thin stick, a whip-like stick there in the vibration, and they allowed me to strike the drum, and this crack that comes through is very physical. It's really physical. And so instantly I fell in love with it. And the rhythms that they were playing they were just so infectious, they really were. And honestly, the stage was just absolutely like a membrane. The whole place was just shaking like this with the power of the sound. And so from that moment, I thought, gosh, that's interesting. And I knew it wasn't something that you could just, go onto the internet and buy. That wasn't the kind of thing. And when you see players who really know how to play an instrument and who are so passionate about their art form, you've got to, I find anyway, I have to sort of zoom out a little bit and observe that. And not just go ploughing in head first, but think, well, what is the history of this drum? Why is it so powerful? What's the meaning of it? And what do I want from it? You then begin to think, well, how can I develop this instrument within my own sort of landscape as an artist? And that's how I basically looked at it, is that I had to see, why do I want this rather large instrument, taking space up, in a room, and what can I do with it in order to broaden my sound palette?
The Lambeg is clearly a big drum, but there are other big drums. So what is different about the Lambeg?
Is the sound unique? Is the sound different from other
Large drums?
It is different. I mean, the closest to this, of course, are the big bass drums, almost like orchestral bass drums, possibly timpani. I mean, funnily enough, with percussion, we don't actually have so many instruments that deal with the lower frequencies. We've got a lot of instruments that produce mid frequencies and high frequencies, cymbals, glockenspiels, triangles, tubular bells, whatever. But low frequencies we really lack, you know, where there's this sustain and resonance and where we can live with that sound for a while. But when you put this beside a bass drum, you then realise that we're talking about two different specimens, actually. Although it's in the low register, this really is slightly higher than a bass drum, but the immediate attack of it is so, it just, you know, it just hits a part of the body that's very different to a bass drum. A bass drum can be struck even quite hard, and then it just, you know, it fattens up a bit in the journey of the sound. With this, it doesn't. It's almost like a bullet, but with a sustain, you know, so it's a thinner sound, but the impact is amazing.
I've seen you play the Lambeg in ways that wouldn't necessarily be recognised as the traditional way.
It's incredibly exciting for me when I'm coming across an instrument for the first time, because it's almost as though you're a child with a new toy, and you're going to, you know, take that toy apart, or you're going to, you know, run it over all sorts of surfaces and whatever, and discover what it can do. And that's exactly the same with an instrument. And obviously I have a jolly good look at it and see what it's made of and what I think it could stand, as it were, you know. So I'm not going to be jabbing triangle sticks like this and attacking a Lambeg in that manner, because I've got enough experience to know I'd probably just go right through the head. But there are lots of different things that I think, ooh, I wonder what if. Because for me, I see myself as a sound creator. I create sound, and that's what a musician does. And a musician needs something to create sound with. You know, it could be a paper and comb, it could be the voice, it could be a Lambeg, it could be a trumpet, whatever. And that's what's interesting, because my job is to create a sound picture or a sound meal and give that sound emotion to then those present and those who happen to be there. And so therefore, for me to explore all of the different parts of an object is really crucial, but to the point where that object becomes not just an object, it then becomes an extension of your sound world, an extension of your limbs and so on.
You like to experiment with new techniques in playing the Lambeg drum.
I have tried this whereby I've had one player on one end and I'm on the other end, and you know, we've created different sounds. So we might have been using Super Ball mallets or a wire brush or some little seed shakers across it, or even just a toy educational type of cymbal flat on the head and just scuffing it like that. All sorts of things. It's an atmospheric instrument, so it's just incredibly responsive to the teeniest little touch, you know, it will speak.
Have you ever used the Lambeg drum in concert or on recordings or in any other aspects of your work? What's the decision-making process? Do you think that piece of music there, that's the instrument that I should use for that? Or
yes, it really depends on the situation. If there is a piece of music and I think, definitely that's the instrument, and there might be space for something, because as percussion players we're always thinking, what is the space we have, the size of the stage and so on. And then I'll start picking and choosing what might be possible. But this Lambeg has been used mainly for media purposes, so writing music for television, radio and films. And because it sets off a different frequency to a bass drum, and you can't quite tell what sort of drum it is, you know, and that's interesting. So it's not just the obvious thing, really, but also when you combine the Lambeg with other instruments. It could even be a timpani, so a particular pitch on a timpani that resonates, with the drum. And then you have another instrument, so that combination of sounds is really interesting. There's a piece I play which is for trumpet and big bass drum, and I've always wanted to try that piece with trumpet and Lambeg. Ideally, I'd like to have it whereby it was trumpet, Lambeg and bass drum, because in some of the really quick rhythmic things, which yes, you can do on a bass drum, but the sound can become a little bit tiresome because you've already had the bass drum, a fair amount before. And there are aspects of that piece that I think, crumbs, I just like a bit more of a crack. And what I have done is use the sticks of the Lambeg on the bass drum to try and get a Lambeg type of feel, if that makes sense. So, but in the places that I've played this piece, it's not possible for me to have flown, the Lambeg to the venues. But yes, there are definitely instances whereby I think even orchestrally, the Lambeg would be really, really good for a percussion section to have, because it opens up that possibility of thinking, okay, the bass drum could well work there. However, a Lambeg might just give that something just different,
What is it about the drum that gives it that unique sound?
I think that's a question that percussionists ask all of the time of all of their instruments. So when you try and compare snare drums, for example, and the shells of the drums and the types of heads used and how it's angled or how it might be mic'd up or what type of snares or what type of acoustic it's then, speaking to and playing with, the type of stick that's used. And this will go on, and not to forget the player themselves. Someone who is, 6'2" or something might produce a very different sound to someone like 5'2", like myself. But we could be playing on the same drum with the same sticks and so on. So just our natural body weight, and the force that we use is unique to us all. And I think that's where it starts, to be honest, is how we use this sort of engine that we have and see the instrument as an extension to that body. And that's really important. So I'm always keen to find and to make sure that people have their own unique sound, and that it's not only because of the skin or only because of the type of shell or only because of the type of stick, that they will produce their own sound, and it has to be their sound. And so it's amazing, because although this is a big drum, this one in particular is quite light actually, but you look at it and you think, oh my God, that's going to create such a big sound. But actually, if you take a Super Ball mallet and you run it, along the skin, you just wouldn't want to meet me in a dark night sort of thing. It's just quite magical, when we're dealing with natural materials, wood and skin and so on. I mean, they have a life of their own too, and we've got to respect that, and that changes, in time. So how we speak to a drum and how a drum speaks to us, we've always got to listen to it and not just assume it's going to say the same thing, as it did years ago. And I think that's really fascinating.
In the drumming community in Ulster, there's a lot of friendly rivalry and competitions called stick-ins. Could you ever see yourself perhaps attending a stick-in in Ulster?
Oh, I attending and being an observer, definitely, as opposed to a participant. And I'm always in awe of just the sheer amazing, obviously technical prowess, but how the rhythms are so innate, you know. And there's a kind of passion there that comes through. So I probably observe these competitions, you know, as a percussion player, as a musician, as a sound creator, as somebody who's just curious about what they do.
Well, thank you so much, Evelyn, for taking the time to talk about your Lambeg drum and your experience of that. And thank you for being a role model to young musicians.
I'm just so glad to have this back.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.